I gave my brother a place to sleep. 3 years later, I'm fighting a legal battle to get my own property back, and it cost me my family's approval to do it. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who takes his own brother to court. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 38 years old, a structural engineer living in Columbus, Ohio. I own a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. I bought it at 29 with my own savings, my own credit, my own 11% down payment scraped together over 4 years of eating lunch at my desk and skipping vacations. It was my first real asset. My first tangible proof that the decisions I'd made, the right school, the right degree, the grinding early career, had added up to something real. For 3 years, my brother Marcus has been living in that apartment without paying a single dollar in rent. Let me back up. The beginning, October 2021. Marcus is 43. He's 5 years older than me and has always operated on a different philosophy of life. Where I planned, Marcus improvised. Where I saved, he spent. Where I saw a contract, he saw an inconvenience. Growing up, I genuinely admired his spontaneity. He had charm that I never had. He could walk into a room and own it within 60 seconds. People loved Marcus. The problem with charm, though, is that it doesn't pay utilities. In the fall of 2021, Marcus called me from Charlotte, where he'd been living with his girlfriend, Priya. They'd split up, her decision, from what I gathered, and he'd been asked to leave the apartment they shared. He had nowhere lined up. His job in sales had dried up during a company restructuring. He was, in his words, in a temporary rough patch. "Danny," he said, "he's the only person who still calls me Danny. I just need a place to land. 1 month, maybe 2. Just until I get a position lined up there and find my own place. You've got that second bedroom sitting empty." He was right. The second bedroom in my apartment on Whitmore Drive had been empty for about 8 months since my roommate moved out. I hadn't re-rented it because I was considering converting it into a home office. I had the space. I had the family. I had, apparently, the soft heart. 1 month, I told him. Maybe 6 weeks if things are slow. "But Marcus, I want you to know, this is temporary. I'll need the space back." "Of course," he said. "You have my word." I should have asked for something more binding than Marcus's word. I know that now. But at the time, asking your older brother to sign a lease agreement before letting him sleep in your spare room felt like the kind of cold, transactional thing that only broken families did. We weren't a broken family. We were the Mercers. Dad worked 30 years for the Postal Service. Mom raised 3 kids in a 4-bedroom house in Westerville and made Sunday dinner every week without fail. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Marcus moved in on October 14, 2021, with 2 duffel bags and a guitar he hadn't played since 2009. The first year, the warnings I ignored. The first month passed easily enough. Marcus was actively job hunting, or so he said. He kept the place reasonably clean. We ate dinner together a few nights a week, caught up on years of life we'd spent in different cities. It felt, briefly, like something genuinely good. Month 2, he mentioned he'd had a few promising interviews but nothing confirmed yet. Month 3, he said the market was weird right now. I started hinting, gently, about timelines. He'd nod and say he was working on it. By month 4, I raised the subject directly. "Marcus, I need a realistic update. I'm not trying to pressure you, but I had plans for this space. What's the actual timeline?" He looked at me with that expression I'd seen him use on skeptical clients. Warm, slightly wounded, utterly disarming. "Danny, I'm your brother. I would never take advantage of you. I'm close. I've got 2 callbacks this week. Just give me until after the holidays." The holidays came and went. By the spring of 2022, Marcus had a job, a sales coordinator role at a mid-sized distribution company downtown. He was making money. Not huge money, but real money. I waited a few weeks for him to bring up the topic of finding his own place. He didn't. I raised it again. "I've been looking," he said. "Rents are insane right now. You've seen the market." He wasn't wrong about the market. Columbus rents had climbed sharply. But I also knew that what I was paying in mortgage, taxes, and HOA fees on that unit was effectively subsidizing his lifestyle while I was renting a studio apartment closer to my office, a place I'd moved into temporarily while Marcus got settled and had now been living in for 8 months myself. Read that again. I was paying rent on a smaller apartment while my brother lived rent-free in the property I owned. I said, "Marcus, I need you to either start paying rent, market rate is around $1,400 for that unit, or I need you to commit to a move-out date." He went quiet. Then he said something that I've replayed in my head many times since. Family doesn't charge family rent, Danny. That's not who we are. I let it go that night. I shouldn't have. But I let it go. Year 2, the pattern becomes a strategy. By the fall of 2022, I had started keeping notes. Not because I was planning anything yet, I didn't have the stomach for it, but because the situation had become surreal enough that I needed to document it for my own sanity. Marcus had settled into the apartment with the comfort of a long-term tenant. He'd put framed photos on the walls. He'd bought a second couch. He had a parking spot in the garage and a drawer in the kitchen for his mail. When I visited my own property, I felt like a guest. Every conversation about the apartment ended the same way. He'd invoke family. He'd mention how hard he was working. He'd bring up some childhood memory, the time I broke his bike and he didn't tell Mom, the time he covered for me when I came home late at 16, as if a lifetime of brotherly debts had been contractually converted into indefinite free housing. I consulted a friend of mine, a real estate attorney named Patricia Osei, over lunch. I laid out the situation carefully. "Does he have any written agreement?" she asked. "No." I let him in on a verbal agreement. Patricia set down her fork. "Daniel, how long has he been there?" "About 14 months. In Ohio, after 30 days of continuous occupancy without a written lease, he has legal tenant status. You can't just ask him to leave anymore. You'd have to formally evict him." The word landed on the table between us like something heavy. "Evict my brother." "I'm just telling you the law," she said carefully. "I'm not telling you what to do." I drove home that evening in a silence I can only describe as the sound of a door closing on who I used to be. Not dramatically. Just quietly, permanently. I didn't act immediately. I spent another 3 months trying the family route. I called my mother, Diane, and explained the situation carefully, not to ask her to intervene, but to make sure she understood my perspective. She listened, then said, "Danny, Marcus has been going through a hard time. He needs his family right now. Mom, he's been going through a hard time for 2 years. In my apartment. For free. Family doesn't keep score," she said. That phrase again. A different version of what Marcus had said. I began to understand that it wasn't a sentiment, it was a shield. A rhetorical device designed to make the person being taken advantage of feel morally responsible for their own exploitation. The decision, January 2023. 15 months in, I made the decision. I'm going to be honest about the emotional state I was in. I wasn't angry, exactly. I was exhausted. There's a particular kind of tired that comes not from overwork but from being perpetually managed, from watching someone you love use your love as a tool against you. It's a quieter suffering than rage, but it goes deeper. I called Patricia again. "I want to start the process," I said. She walked me through it. In Ohio, to evict a tenant without a written lease, you must serve a written notice to vacate, 30 days for a month-to-month tenancy established by conduct. After 30 days, if the tenant has not vacated, you file for eviction in Franklin County Municipal Court. There would be a hearing. It would be civil, legal, and documented. "He'll fight it," I said. "He might. But you own the property, there's no written lease, and you've given him more than reasonable time. You have a strong case." I spent 2 weeks preparing everything. I documented 14 months of written and verbal communications asking Marcus to establish a timeline or pay rent. I compiled screenshots of text messages. I printed bank statements showing the mortgage I was paying on a unit I wasn't living in. I wrote a precise, unemotional account of every conversation we'd had on the subject. Then I drafted the notice to vacate. I didn't serve it by text. I didn't leave it on the kitchen counter. I hired a process server to deliver it formally, on a Tuesday morning in January 2023, while Marcus was home. He called me 40 minutes later. "Are you serious right now?" His voice was tight in a way I'd never heard before. "Danny, you sent a process server to my door." "To my door," I said quietly. "It's my apartment, Marcus. I am your brother." "I know. That's why I gave you 14 months before doing this." He hung up. Within the hour, my phone began ringing. First my mother. Then my father, Robert, who almost never calls. Then my younger sister, Angela. Each conversation followed a similar arc. Shock, disappointment, the suggestion that I was being cold and legalistic about something that should be handled within the family. I listened to all of them. I explained my position to all of them. I asked each of them, with genuine curiosity, what they believed the correct resolution looked like, specifically, concretely, with a timeline. None of them had an answer to that question. What they had was feeling. What they wanted was for me to absorb the discomfort so the family didn't have to have the harder conversation. I understood that, and I refused to do it. Update 1, February 2023, the 30 days. The 30-day notice period was one of the stranger months of my life. Marcus did not move out. He did not respond in writing to the notice. What he did was call a family meeting. My parents drove up from Westerville. Angela came with her husband, Greg. Marcus had apparently prepared remarks, because he spoke for nearly 20 minutes about his journey, his setbacks, the difficulty of the current housing market, and, pointedly, about the kind of man our father had raised us to be. Dad always said family comes first, Marcus said, looking at my father. That's what he taught us. My father, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He's a practical man, fundamentally, even if he defaults toward peace. Marcus, he said slowly, Danny does have a point that... I've been paying into this family my whole life, Marcus interrupted. When Danny needed help with his application essays, who spent 3 weekends going over them? When Angela's car broke down in 2015, who lent her $800 that she never paid back? Angela went red. That's not... I'm just saying, Marcus said, his voice dropping to something calculated and calm, that family keeps score when it's convenient and doesn't when it isn't. It was, I'll admit, a rhetorically sophisticated move. He'd turned my mother's phrase against me and simultaneously created a grievance pyramid that put everyone on the defensive. In that moment, watching my brother perform family loyalty for an audience of our parents, I felt something clarify inside me like water settling. I said, Marcus, I'm not asking for a debate. I'm asking you to vacate the property by February 14th, as per the notice. If you'd like to make arrangements before then, I'm happy to discuss them. If you need help finding a place, I will personally help you search. But the date stands. My mother began to cry softly. I felt terrible. I also did not change my position. Update 2, March 2023, filing for eviction. February 14th came and went. Marcus did not move out. He sent me a single text that evening, I'm not leaving. You want me out, do what you have to do. So I did. On February 17th, I filed a formal eviction complaint with the Franklin County Municipal Court. The filing fee was $121. Patricia helped me prepare the documentation. We submitted the notice to vacate, my proof of property ownership, bank statements, and a written timeline of events. The court scheduled a hearing for March 8th. I won't pretend the filing didn't cost me something. My mother stopped calling me for 2 weeks. My father sent a text, one of the only texts I've ever received from him, that read, I hope you know what you're doing, son. I wasn't sure if it was a warning or a question. Marcus, I learned through Angela, had retained a lawyer of his own. This surprised me. The lawyer, she said, was going to argue that Marcus had established tenancy through a verbal agreement and was entitled to 60 days' notice rather than 30. Patricia reviewed the argument. He's partially right, she said. In Ohio, courts sometimes extend informal tenancies to 60 days depending on the circumstances. But given the duration of the stay and your documented attempts to establish a resolution, I still think we're in strong shape. The 3 weeks between filing and the hearing were quiet in an eerie way. Marcus and I didn't communicate directly. The apartment sat between us like a chessboard. I continued paying the mortgage, the HOA fees, the water bill, continued paying for a home I wasn't living in, for a tenant who had declared, in writing, that he refused to leave. Update 3, the hearing, March 8, 2023. The Franklin County Courthouse on Mound Street has the particular atmosphere of all civil courtrooms, fluorescent efficiency, rows of plastic chairs, the procedural business of people's worst days being sorted into case numbers. I sat on one side of the aisle with Patricia. Marcus sat on the other side with his attorney, a youngish man named Kevin Hargrove who kept clicking his pen. My parents were in the gallery. My mother had her hands folded in her lap. My father stared at the middle distance. The hearing itself was 45 minutes. Hargrove argued that the verbal agreement constituted a tenancy, that the 30-day notice was insufficient given the duration of occupation, and that eviction would cause significant hardship. He used the word family twice, which I found interesting, as if kinship were a legal principle. Patricia presented our case cleanly. Property ownership. Documented 14-month pattern of requests for resolution. Written text messages. No payment ever made or formally offered. The voluntary nature of Marcus's original occupancy. The magistrate, a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Judge Elaine Worthy, asked Marcus one question directly. Sir, at any point during your stay, did you offer to pay rent? Marcus paused. It was a family arrangement. That's not what I asked, Judge Worthy said. Another pause. No. Judge Worthy ruled in my favor on the primary matter. She granted a 60-day vacate order rather than 30. Hargrove had won that point, setting a final move-out deadline of May 8, 2023. She also noted, for the record, that the respondent had occupied the property for 17 months beyond his stated timeline with no financial contribution and had been given multiple documented opportunities to resolve the matter informally. When we walked out of the courtroom, Marcus walked past me without speaking. My mother touched my arm briefly, but I couldn't read the expression on her face. My father said, "All right," which in Robert Mercer's vocabulary is a complicated word. Update 4, April and May 2023, the fallout. The 60 days after the hearing were not peaceful. Marcus, to no one's surprise, did not quietly begin packing. What he did instead was launch what I can only describe as a reputation campaign. He called relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, cousins, an aunt in Cincinnati, my mother's sister in Phoenix, and delivered his version of events. In his version, he was a man struggling through hard times who had been dragged into court by a younger brother too concerned with money to understand what family meant. He mentioned the childhood debts. He mentioned our father's values. He was, by all accounts, persuasive. My phone filled with messages from people I barely knew expressing disappointment in me. I did not respond to most of them. The ones I responded to, I sent the same message, a brief, factual timeline. No editorializing. No emotional appeal. Just dates, conversations, and outcomes. Some people came back to me after reading it. Not many. Enough. The harder front was my parents. My mother had shifted from grief to something more like quiet anger, not at Marcus, as far as I could tell, but at the situation, which in her emotional geography was somehow my fault for having made it visible. My father, as the weeks passed, began to seem more reflective. He and I had a long phone call in mid-April that I'll probably carry with me for the rest of my life. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer me straight." "Of course. Is this about money? Or is this about something else?" I thought about it for a long moment. It's about the fact that when I say no, it should mean no. It's about the fact that love shouldn't cost me the right to my own property. It's about the fact that I've been paying rent on a studio apartment for a year and a half because I was too soft to draw a line sooner. A long silence. Then my father said, "Your mother and I were going to lend him money for a deposit on a new place. We already talked to him about it. That's your choice to make, Dad. I'm not asking anyone to cut him off. I'm asking for my apartment back." Another silence. "Okay," he said. "I hear you." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It wasn't even full understanding. But it was something real. Marcus moved out on May 6th, 2 days before the court deadline. He did not say goodbye. He did not leave the apartment in the condition he'd found it. There was damage to the kitchen backsplash, a broken closet door, and what appeared to be a burn mark on the living room carpet. Collectively, I estimated about $1,800 in repairs. I documented everything photographically before touching a single item. Then I contacted Patricia. "Small claims," she said. "Open and shut." Update 5, Summer 2023, Aftermath and Resolution. I filed in small claims court in June. Marcus did not contest it. I received a judgment for $1,743 in property damage. He paid it, not immediately, but he paid it, which surprised me. I moved back into the apartment in June 2023. I refinished the kitchen backsplash myself over a weekend. I replaced the carpet in the living room. I hung new curtains. I painted the second bedroom a deep blue-gray that I'd been thinking about for 3 years. It felt like reclaiming something that was mine in a way that went beyond property law. The family situation did not resolve cleanly, because family situations don't. My mother and I went through a period of careful distance, not estrangement, but the kind of recalibrated space that comes after a conflict exposes something true. We had dinner in July, just the two of us, at the Italian place near their house where we used to go when I was in college. She didn't apologize directly. What she said was, "I just want things to be okay between all of you." I said, "I want that too. But I can't want it more than the people involved want it." She looked at me for a long time. "When did you get so grown up?" she said finally. "I've been grown up for a while, Mom." I think this just made it harder to ignore. Marcus and I have not had a real conversation since the day of the hearing. I won't say I've given up on a future where we have some kind of relationship. But I'm no longer willing to purchase proximity to my brother at the cost of my own integrity. If he wants a relationship, the door is open. The door to the apartment, though, has a new lock. I had it rekeyed in June, the first afternoon I was back. My father came by once in late July, on the pretense of dropping off a toolbox he'd been meaning to return to me for 2 years. He walked through the apartment slowly, looking at what I'd done with the space. He stopped in the doorway of the second bedroom. "Nice color," he said. "Thanks, Dad." He nodded at the room for a moment. "For what it's worth," he said, and then stopped. "Yeah." He turned and looked at me with the face of a man who has been reconsidering something for several months. "You were right," he said. "I should have said that sooner." I didn't expect those words. I'd stopped needing them somewhere around February. But they landed somewhere soft in me anyway, and I was grateful for them. I thanked him. We drank coffee in the kitchen. We talked about baseball and his knee surgery and nothing at all, the way fathers and sons sometimes do when the heavy things have already been said and there's something relieved and new beginning in the space they leave behind. Reflection. Here is what I know now that I didn't fully know before this happened. Love is not an indefinite financial instrument. It is not a lease with no terms. You can love someone completely, without reservation, and still require them to honor basic agreements. You can be a good son, a good brother, a good member of a family, and still say, "This is mine and I need it back." The hardest part of this entire process was not the courtroom. It wasn't the hostile text messages, or the family calls, or the weeks of silence from my mother. The hardest part was the internal work of separating love from obligation, of untangling the belief, installed in me since childhood, that family loyalty meant absorbing whatever was asked of me without complaint. I loved my brother through all of it. I love him now. That love did not require me to give him my apartment for 3 years. What I got back was not just property. It was a clearer sense of my own edges, the places where I end and where even family responsibility must stop. That clarity cost me something, and I want to be honest about that. It cost me comfort and approval and the particular peace of a family that never has to confront the hard things. But it gave me something better and quieter and more durable. The knowledge that when I draw a line, I will hold it. That my yes means yes and my no means no, and that these are not failures of love but conditions of it. That the boundaries I set are not walls built to keep people out but structures built to make sure that when people are in, they are there honestly. The apartment on Whitmore Drive is mine. It has been mine since I was 29 years old. It will continue to be mine, on whatever terms I decide. And on a Tuesday evening in late July, after my father left and the summer light was going gold through the windows of the living room, I sat in the apartment that I had fought to reclaim and felt, for the first time in almost 3 years, completely at home. Edit. I didn't expect this to get any traction. Thank you to everyone who shared their own stories. To those of you asking, yes, I would do it again. To those telling me I'm a bad brother, I've made my peace with that.